Well, good afternoon and welcome to Christian Concern Live. I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. We're going to talk about churches in lockdown and all that means and what's going on there. And we're also going to talk about abortion. There's been a lot of news about abortion this week as well. So we're going to catch up on that as well. With me today, I have Pastor Ade Omooba, MBE, one of the co-founders of Christian Concern. Ade, do join us. Welcome. Great to have you with us here. How are you?
Very well. Good to be here.
Great. Thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time to do it. I know, Ade, that the lockdown restrictions have really exercised you, or you're very concerned about them and the way that's been gone about. Would you like to talk about how you felt about the lockdown restrictions on churches in particular? From when they started in towards the end of March.
Thanks, Tim. And yes, it's really been a bother for me because the whole thing has been a very defining moment for church. It's speaking a lot about where church is in this nation. And if I would like to start by saying that I love this country. I've been in full-time ministry here for going to now 3.5 decades. We pray for our government. People like myself and other leaders, we've provided so many social action projects in the last 3 decades to support the populace, to support government by serving the most vulnerable, by speaking for the marginalized. In my own role in doing that, I have had opportunity to sit in one way or the other with the last 4 prime ministers, with their deputies where they have their different secretary of state, with the last 3 mayors of London. And I can go on. I've been engaging government for a long time on so many issues and so many ways, because people like us see ourselves as critical partners with government. That is, we will give advice when it's sought from us, but we'll also hold them accountable and transparent. And so we work together with government. However, what COVID-19 has done is brought a reality about where we are as church. The government, rightly so, yes, panicked because they hadn't seen this before. And they did the right thing by consulting the science, the medicine, and politics. But spirituality was not consulted from day one. That says a lot to us, at least for church. Why do I say at least for church? That's because the nation at least affiliates more to Christianity, and historically has a lot of its values, drawn from scriptures. And what I'm saying there is that we should have been consulted alongside all those 3 stratas of society. Government should have said, so what is God saying? Or we tell them, this is what God is saying. This is what this means to the soul of the nation. None of that was given. And then the next thing that happened, it brings me to law, is government now thought that, well, we have an instrument of law to use to ensure that both church and everybody else is held in order and accountable. Now, I don't think they should have used that in some cases. They could have had a conversation at least with church from day one, and we could have made some of our buildings as oases of hope, where it could have been adapted to help COVID patients where we can, with responsible prayer gathering round the clock. Government missed that, but I don't blame them too much, even though I'm going to hold them accountable, because the voice of the church has been mute on so many issues over the years. And so they passed that law, even though we shut down almost at the same time, and we're responsible. And we watch to see what will happen next. We heard nothing. And as we heard nothing, we were thinking at least we'll be deemed essential, but we were not. Even though a lot of our members, frontline workers, NHS, healthcare, our people were there. When they began to ease the lockdown, we were bottom of the category. This is saying a lot about how they view the church. Yeah, this is the point for us to begin to see How do they value us? We all read in scriptures when nations were in crisis, oh, they went to Elijah. They went to the people of God in the land and asked them alongside everything else. And then also, the Bible, we all preach, disciple the nations. Where is the discipline of a nation in crisis? The people, the institution, and the systems. And it was at that point we realized then, okay, no matter how much we work responsibly with government, government must also be held accountable with the same law that they have asked us to be accountable.
Yes.
And the law provides a JR. And that's why even the members of parliament, when they were shut down or locked down by the prime minister, what did they do? They used the law to call government accountable and reverse their own shutdown of parliament. Because that's what the law is there to do. And we've seen other people do the same now, whether it's, correct me if I'm wrong, whether it's a private school or the airlines. And I've just read about a woman who is taking government to court because her father died in the care homes. And she's angry about the way that care homes and people were sent back there and lives were lost. Again, what are people using that to do? We need to hold government accountable. Can I say something, please? For those who are trying to critique using what government provides for us to hold them accountable. If any of us as church at this time were to do anything wrong, either now or even pre-COVID or post-COVID, no matter what our good intentions are, we will be held accountable by law.
Yes.
Why is the government different from being held accountable? And in saying that, we began to think, how do we hold them accountable? A pre-action letter. The moment we had a pre-action letter, then we realized there was a round table. There was a task force. Things began to change because pressure of accountability brought that. And I have been on a couple of those round tables.
Yes.
To listen to what are the conversations. How are those conversations transferring to what government briefings are? And I realized that people are speaking in those conversations up until when we put our letter in, but none of that was transferring to the briefings until our letter went in. And within minutes, I got a call from senior advisor from number 10. And some of the things we're asking, from ensuring that they now created a roundtable for BAME church leaders. I went on another one for multi-faith church leaders. And we now have somebody put on the task force, all because of the pressure of the letter. And now guidelines are out on, as it were, the last day before you had any chance by law to hold government accountable. I'm not surprised. That
so I gather that Andrea Williams has managed to join us, Chief Executive of Christian Concern. So Andrea, great to see you. Well done joining us. And I can see some people putting comments up as well on Facebook and YouTube, somebody from South Wales, somebody from Redditch here as well. Do put your questions and comments up there. I want to hear from Rector Ipsley on Facebook. He says, shutting the church now has shown them they can do it again quite easily. Now, Ade, would you like to talk about that aspect of it?
Yeah, and that's the reason why the whole principle of us saying that the JR is a tool of government to hold government accountable, just like government uses the law to get the church accountable. That's why the MPs used it as well, to keep government accountable.
I mean,
that's
and who is it that we're trusting? I mean, we actually have to ask, this is a government that in the week preceding lockdown said on the floor of the House of Commons, said on the floor of the House of Lords, that the law on abortion would not be changed. We, through a case, and this is really not to switch the subject, but it's to show the kind of people that we are trusting to shut us down. We then have evidence that shows that across that weekend, the abortion lobby lobbied senior civil servants and the government reversed its decision. So now we have access to DIY abortions. This is the chaotic nature of the government that we have. And while they say that they want to save lives by shutting down the church, they're also asking the church to be there to supply food banks. If the government can trust us to supply food banks, then something is wrong somewhere when we, the people of God, have not explained to the government that just as there is physical food, so that there is spiritual food. We are the people that can be in the communities, that can be the SOS houses in the communities. We are the people that can be there, that fall through the net of social services, that actually need that needs to be saved from their isolation, need spiritual sustenance. Physically, sometimes we can even save them. That's what the church is there to do. And we have said we will shut up, we will shut our doors, when in fact we are the hospitals, we are the rescue people. Now, do I think for 1 minute that we should be reckless, that we should of course not. Do I think that we shouldn't be taking into account all the advice that the government is giving us? Of course we should take it into account, but that's what it is, advice. And then what we need to do with that advice is think, how can we best do ministry in this context to serve the people? If Sainsbury's can be kept open, if the corner shop that can be kept open, then our church leaders ought to be trusted to keep their facilities open for the good of the people.
But I think, Andrea, and perhaps I'll pass to Ade now.
Yeah.
Ade, I know you're itching to say something. I just want to frame it this way. You know, what was really disturbing about this was they actually criminalized Christian ministry, didn't they? You know, if you could operate a food bank in your church, but if you started praying with people, that would be illegal, and you could be prosecuted for that. You could get a criminal conviction for it.
One of the things that in the guidelines and on the round table with the minister this week that he was shocked about was when he asked, so will our churches be opened this Saturday? Somehow he expects us to be opening our churches, this Sunday. And the leader said that, no, we're not. Because what you've given us does not allow us to open. You're telling us that we can gather, observe social distancing, but we cannot sing. We cannot even shout or raise our voice and shout unto the Lord. You know, so there's nothing about the Holy Spirit leading us. So what are we gathering to do? And we're trying to make him understand. Do you understand how we worship?
Just explain that point further, Ade, the point about the Holy Spirit. So, you know, these regulations constrain the Holy Spirit, don't they? You can't sing, you know. So, you know, the Spirit, the ministry of the Spirit is constrained by these rules. You cannot allow anybody to sing. You cannot allow anybody to shout. You know, you cannot allow the Holy Spirit to move under these rules. That's the way it is, isn't it?
And I mentioned that exactly to the faith minister and those on the round table with me and the other leaders, that this is exactly what you're saying. And apart from that, you look at the fact that I'm saying this to church leaders, going back to where I started. If we allow science in the time of crisis to be the go-to, and medicine and politics in a time of crisis, and we don't make this government accountable and realize that when there's crisis, you must bring spirituality of the nation to it, then what is the essence of being here in discipling a nation when even we as leaders are ready to keep quiet, shut ourselves, be dictated to, told how to worship, and let others tell us what to do in crisis? That's not the prescription that God gave in scriptures.
Ade, I think that Pastor Ade, I think that what's been very interesting as well is that when you and the other ministry leaders have gone into government, it was as if scales came off their eyes in terms of them understanding the principle of the independence of the church, and also and how important that principle was. The state can't dictate to the church what to believe, how to this kind of how to worship, but also this, so that there's a sense in which they began to understand. They began to understand that in a very real way. And I think that when we blame government, that when we're quick to or critique government generally, my heart goes out to the government. My heart goes out to the leaders of the institutions, because if they do not know King Jesus, the King of Kings, if they do not know that he is Lord, then how can they see? And this is Ade's point, that when suddenly the government is treating us like a cinema or a gym and seeing us as no different, it's because they really do see us as no different. when
Yes.
when actually Jesus Christ is the King of Kings, and one day every knee shall bow, and we have the whole life to give to our communities. And I think what I want to say is that people, perhaps even those that are listening to us right now, sometimes I think don't even hear what we are trying to say. This is not about putting anyone at risk. This is not about recklessly opening our churches. It is about saying we too can be the hospitals. We can be the spiritual places. We are here to serve the community. Of course, we're going to keep the vulnerable amongst us safe and those that are vulnerable in the community. But for those of us that are healthy and strong and have taken the appropriate precautions, we're here to serve. And actually, our churches can be safe places. And I think that's something that we haven't thought through. They're very these arguments in the space. It's almost as if you're immediately shut down as being granny killers. As if
So can I,
I want
Andrea,
to
can
add
I get you
something,
to
Andrea. I
respond
want
to?
to add something to
Go on, Ade.
Andrea, and I need to say this because people keep talking about the government being responsible, trying to be responsible. This is a government that allows Cummings to decide how he will deal with their guidelines, and he was okay. And this is a responsible government that is passing a DIY abortion bill. We're coming to that in the time when COVID is killing people. And then this is the same government when we're saying we have serious family breakdown challenges, and the whole issue about marriage helps hold family accountable. Has decided this is a time to now have a no-fault divorce. I call it legalizing official wed lease.
Yeah.
At a time like this, yes. At a time like this.
So can I just get you to respond to this comment? There's a comment here from Dino, or Diana, is it? Burton Hooper on Facebook saying everything was shut, not just the churches, and the idea of risking Christians or risking non-Christians by opening the churches during lockdown was the most selfish thing I've experienced in church life. If we love people, we look out for them before our own spiritual needs. Now, the point is actually that churches were open for food banks and blood banks and various other things like that, and also that off licenses were open throughout, and DIY stores were open throughout, and all these other things were open throughout. What was banned was any spiritual ministry. That was the thing. Your churches were open for these services. They were open to serve people in these ways, but you couldn't do any spiritual thing. That's the thing, isn't it? Here,
the thing that's been chilling, Tim and Pastor Ade, is this, because we're sort of long time now in the public space on these matters. It's as if the church has become totally irrelevant, almost like we've been forgotten about in the public discourse in terms of consideration. You know, they were thinking about supermarkets and cinemas and gyms, but it was as if the church was the idea that this would be a problem for us, or the idea that we would have something to contribute. We've become so small in the public imagination, in the government's imagination. When this started out, and that really makes my heart weep, because I think we've shrunk, and we shrink and privatize our ministry. We take ourselves into our churches. We're so busy doing church when we're to go and disciple nations, not just individuals. It's nations, institutions. We are to be the lighthouses of our community. We should be open. I'm talking pre-COVID, post-COVID, 24/7. That's my challenge for churches. Open 24/7, being the place of first resort and last resort, because we have good news that transforms not just the physical, but the spiritual. We are the hope of this nation. We're the hope of this government, and we have allowed ourselves, Pastor Ade, haven't we, to be relegated. We're like a little fly, not a little nuisance.
All of this, let's remind ourselves this. If there's one part of society, in this country at least, that have kept responsible all through this lockdown, even with all our frustrations, we have not in any way done anything to undermine any guideline, even though we're not happy with it. We've remained responsible. The people protesting disregarded guidelines, came out in their probably hundreds of thousands over 3 weeks. Science should take note. COVID did not spike regardless of what they did. And then now I'm hearing they are having illegal raves. People are disobeying government. We are still the ones remaining what? Responsible. Listening to government. So people should be careful when they start to question what we're doing by speaking out and holding government accountable. We're still trying all we can do to say that we must use this opportunity as church to regain our prophetic and authoritative voice to the nation. We have a moment here.
We do. And can I say, this is something else that I hope I can make clear on this live stream. I hope that as I speak it, it will be heard properly. During this period as well, we've heard a lot of talk in government circles about moves to ban so-called conversion therapy. That's people moving away from unwanted sexual behaviors. This will become a health and safety issue. All right, just like we're being shut down for COVID because of health and safety. So the point about this is, if you get the banning of so-called conversion therapy, it bans conversion therapy. And then the government will be saying to the churches, you can't speak about the fact that people can change their behaviors, that people can move away from their sexual identity. That is something that's forbidden in the public space. No, you're not independent. When you speak these particular things in your sermons, you are violating the national code. That's what happens when you allow the law in this way to enter the church and dictate what you what you are doing. We have seen this over and over again now in our cases. We've seen where ministers who've preached services.
So just Andrea, just to explain what you mean by therapy there, you're talking about talking therapy, aren't you? You're talking about somebody who just wants to talk it through with somebody. That's all we mean, isn't it? Just having a conversation. In other words, this is about banning a conversation or making some conversations illegal. That's basically what it is, yeah?
That's absolutely right. And I want to say that the irony of this conversion therapy, which they attach to people who do talking therapy, really excellent therapy. Mike Davis of Core Issues Trust is a hero in this regard. And there are therapists now across the world, a network of therapists that do this, but essentially banned in the United Kingdom because
we've got Matthew Grech on the line, by the way, Andrea, watching here. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, that's amazing. Yeah. Hi to Matthew. And
you know what, Andrea?
Go and check out Core Issues and X Out Loud.
Story, yeah.
I can finish just on this point. Or perhaps I've lost it because perhaps Ade, then you can interrupt me.
I was just going to say that as a pastor in this nation, I've heard people who are homosexuals in same-sex attracted relationships come to me in church and said, I'm struggling with this. I don't like it, and I need help to get out of it. This is not anybody enforcing it in them. And we've spoken, had conversation. They've decided to come to us because that is their choice of where they believe they can get help to deal with it. Others can go somewhere else. It's their right to do that. And for us to legislate to ban any of that, it's ridiculous.
It's essentially banning gospel conversion. And the irony of all of this, and this is the point I was going to make, those therapies that they kind of try and put on us, put on the church and so on, are therapies that were actually done by the psychiatric professions. The electric shock type of therapy, this sort of stuff was done back in the 1940s, 1950s, early 1960s by the professions themselves, not by us. You know, this standard at which people are operating is incredible at this time. And also, furthermore, you know, the testimony of Matthew Grech, go and check it out. But is a fantastic one of Jesus Christ setting him free. And there are countless others in that movement that is so vibrant right now. But you know what? Once we allow the government in, then Romans 1 gets banned, and we've seen this over in our churches. This is the kind of thing that happens next. You will be compelled in a marriage ceremony to marry two men. It will no longer be a matter of freedom, a matter of choice. The government will force it by way of compliance. How many times in our cases have we found that the cross is the cross that's worn by a nurse and has been worn for 30 years safely on duty suddenly becomes a health and safety issue? It's not a health and safety issue. It's a gospel issue. And this is where we have to stand. But I think overall, Ade, what I want to say is this. I feel like I've been on the front line right here in this little desk space in many ways during lockdown. But oh, how I would have loved. I said to my family, how I would love to be on the front line. How I would love to be rolling up my sleeves, taking the proper precautions, and being on the front lines of community, going helping the lonely, going feeding the sick and the sorrowing. All of this stuff is stuff I would have loved to see the church doing. I'm excited about online. I think that's all fantastic. But you know, a lot of the really needy don't get online. You know, that's for the kind of a lot of people that are together can be online. People that are lost and sorrowing and hurt and lonely, perhaps poor, they are not they're not all online. The whole world isn't online.
Yep, that's right.
There's stuff we've got to
Don't worry, you're on the front line, Andrea, in a different front line. Don't worry, you are on the front line. You're not behind the scenes on this, you know. So Ade, where's it going in terms of the lockdown from here? How do you see it playing out for churches and with the government and so on?
Well, at least one thing that has happened is that I'm happy that the leaders that I gather with on the round table with government are very outspoken. They are letting government understand, one, the issue of autonomy of church is still there and self-governance of church, but they're also saying the guidelines you're putting out are not practicable. They're not workable. You know, for us, for many of us, it's just so the government was talking about online when you mentioned, and I remember some of the pastors on the round table I was saying, do you know how difficult it is for us to put together the worship team for online? And it's not easy. They even said, would you even allow us to have at least our worship team in the church to do the recording on stage with nobody there, just to release the stress of that? I could see the government was not even aware what goes into getting that done. And so really where we are is that I think they got a bit of a shock, at least from the roundtable I was, that quite a lot of the churches are not going to open this Sunday because your guideline has not really given them enough to be able to open. And they're saying they're going to take that back and take a lot of the things we're talking about the whole issue around, even when we said to them, can people then sing? The people who have car parks.
And we've got a question here, Ade, a question about, can we sing outside if we can't sing inside? Right? And there's an issue there, isn't there? As in, you know, on church premises, they're saying singing is restricted, right? Whereas outside of a church context, it's not restricted. You know, it's kind of crazy, isn't it?
Saying? They actually, when I asked that question, what they're saying is that, well, the reason is not in the guideline is that they will actually prefer people don't sing outside. That's what I was told. Really? With the faith minister there, that you know, we will take it back, but for now, as the guidelines is there, for you can gather outside, but you cannot still have congregational singing and the things that they say you can't do inside. You know, and this is where I sit down and I think to myself, everyone who was protesting for 3 weeks was screaming, shouting, probably singing. We see our footballers now playing, puffing and hoofing on each other. You know, what's that? You know, but we are not responsible enough.
Okay. We've got a comment here from Kenny Gidd, is it, on YouTube? I'm not a quarter as much enraged with the government as I am with those in our churches who oppose the church being afforded at least the same priority as quarter shops, etc. Totally with you there on that, Kenny. You know, that it's the deprioritization of the church that is really the big thing here that I think we're upset about, isn't it?
I think one point I also want to make clear, I think that isn't getting through to a lot of people, is this, that the regulations that will criminalize churches that don't comply with the emergency legislation, they are still in place. That's hard law. All right. Much has been made by some church leaders that the guidance that has been issued is guidance, and churches. So don't worry, church, because it's just guidance. Can I say this? That at the moment we're expecting some new regulations to be published today, and we need to look at what they actually say. But let me say this: that non-compliance will at least be a civil matter that can enter into the churches with health and safety regulations and so on, and might even become criminal at certain points. And I think that we have to remember this because it gives state reach into how we organise ourselves within the church. Now, look, if a church is entirely decrepit, just in general, and as there are a whole bunch of fire hazards, then we might be questioning the leadership of our church in terms of how they're running their church. These rules are often set in place for good purpose, but the idea that the state is going to issue regulations and criminalise us still, which is still currently the position, is extraordinarily worrying. Which is why we haven't withdrawn. Which is why we haven't withdrawn the legal action, because until we know that we are free, it is vital that we hold the government to account.
Well, it's not just that, it's also the precedent that they did criminalise Christian activity, didn't they? So I think we need to hold them account for that.
Correct.
I wanted to talk about what you said, Andrea, where we ask in the round table something a bit tied to the issue of enforcing the law is insurance.
Yeah.
We raised insurance because a lot of churches said that their insurers will not cover them, even though you said these are guidelines and, but when they've gone through the insurance and the government has now gone actually to check with the largest, probably insurance, and that insurance company said you will probably be breaching your insurance if you don't follow the guidelines. They will hold you to the guidelines. Now, that's a serious thing. That the insurance company that is meant to help you as a church is saying that if you break those guidelines, you are not covered.
Yeah, no, it's a problem. So I want to move on now to talking about abortion, because there's been a huge amount of news this week. I mean, really big news this week on abortion, and perhaps the biggest piece, although it's in a tough competition, perhaps the biggest piece is the news that there's an amendment being placed to the domestic abuse bill that would effectively decriminalise abortion. Andrea, do you want to talk to us about that and explain what has happened about that?
Well, I think that we have seen the abortion industry working ceaselessly throughout this whole period. Their plan over many years, and as someone who's tracked the industry over many years, has been to decriminalise abortion laws and to get to a position whereby abortion is viewed simply as medical treatment, and that a woman should be free. The only person that it concerns is the woman who is pregnant, and that she should be able to access abortion freely and really without questioning, that it's simply medical treatment. And they did this at the start of the lockdown by seizing an opportunity, saying that lives would be put at risk if women went to the clinics in order to access medical abortion. And then really through trickery, and we've already spoken about this earlier on in the live stream, really through trickery, they extended the law. They changed the law so that women could receive 2 abortion pills at home after a video consultation, a little bit like me looking through the screen at you right now. That was an incredible thing that they did, despite assurances from the government on the floor of the House of Commons that they wouldn't change abortion law. They did this bowing to the pressure of the abortion lobby.
So the other news this week, Andrea, since you're on that point, is that we've won permission to appeal on our legal case about that. So, which is a bit of good news, isn't it?
I think that our case, again, about being vigilant, and I suppose on the front line, we worked really hard on this. Anne Farady talked of the need for there to be access to 40,000, Anne Farady is the chief executive of BPAS, there needed to be access to abortion by post for some 40,000 women on the first 3 months of lockdown. Now, bear in mind, 50,000 people, just above that, I think, have died in the United Kingdom from COVID-19. She was talking about 40,000 abortions in this period. We know that the stats on abortion are 200,000 every year at the moment. So let's just think about those figures as well. So I'm absolutely delighted again, that we are holding the government to account on extending abortion law. The abortion law there is to protect the woman, to protect the unborn child and those around her, the rights of the father, all of these things. And they have rode a coach and horses through that legislation by extending it in this way. And what Anne Farady and the abortion lobby knew was that once we got this happening in practice, it would just be a short step forward to make it a reality, which is what they're trying to do on Monday. So they put in an amendment to make this hard law for Monday. And that's the softer of the two amendments, believe it or not. And it's an amendment and it's horrific. The other amendment is essentially to away with certain sections of the Offences Against the Person Act, which has long stood for one and a half centuries, that protection of the unborn child is to do away with that and to essentially allow access to abortion for a woman up to 28 weeks. And let me just say that the other horrific thing this week is that the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, again, the chief executive there is an avid activist with a hotline to the senior civil servant in the Department of Health. All of these emails were revealed in our court disclosure on our case, which is also why it's so important to do the cases and to get this information. But the guidance for which she is responsible said this: if there is a danger during COVID emergency, and a woman is getting close to the 24-week cutoff limit for a healthy baby, there should be feticide. So the killing of the baby at 23 weeks, this is actually in the Royal Colleges, the Royal College. There should be feticide of the child, and the child should be aborted later than the 24-week cutoff line. So the woman is there to carry a dead baby.
They're recommending killing the baby first, leaving the baby in the womb, and then taking the baby out later on, aren't they? That's what they're recommending.
That's
You could, if there's a danger of it going over the number of weeks, you kill the baby first, and then leave the baby in the womb, and you can take it out later, and that'll be fine. I mean, it's a deliberate attempt to circumvent the law on this, isn't it?
Circumventing the law. It's a deliberate attempt to circumvent the law, and it's, at the end of the day, it's institutional, state-sanctioned killing.
Yes.
And the law,
it makes it very clear. It's deliberately saying, you kill the baby, do at least an injection or something like that, and then worry about taking it out sometime later.
And the thing is that I'm sorry, I sit here again for my front line. And
you're on the front line.
I feel traumatized. I don't want to sound too emotional about this, but it's as if, can anyone hear? Can anyone see? Can the church hear? Can the church see? Do we understand that this is going on?
Yeah.
Do we understand that the state and those institutions that should properly regulate the profession are advocating killing?
Yeah.
I mean, it is, and we have no, and it's even again, the church. It's as if, does the church not care? And I know that there's a lot of people that do.
Yeah.
But have we allowed it to come to this? And again, just another big statistic which ought to just sober us a little bit. This was earlier in the week when I checked the statistics, maybe 3 days ago. But across the globe so far, I think the death by COVID is above 500,000. It's 500,000 plus, but not much plus.
Yeah.
Death by abortion, this was 2 or 3 days ago, was 21 million so far this year. 21 million. The world has stopped. The world is gripped by fear. Nations
Andrea,
are gripped by fear.
Andrea, please know something. Look, I'm a pastor. Just hearing you say that, honestly, my heart bleeds.
Me too.
And I'm speaking right now to church leadership.
Yeah.
That if we in the church do not see that this is an emergency situation in our own time and season, where 21 million are killed in the womb, who God says Before they were in their mother's womb, he knew them. And it doesn't move us. It doesn't break our heart. We don't even talk about it in church. We don't even speak about it. We're not even thinking of having pregnancy crisis, crisis pregnancy lines.
There should be one in every town, one in every church. Every town, there should be a pregnancy crisis line. You know, that's the 24/7 church, Daddy. There should be one in every single town. We can save the situation. We can turn it around. We just got to think big. Or not even think big, think local. Think local.
One thing we can do, and I would encourage you all to do this if you possibly can, write to your MP today or over the weekend at the very latest, and please tell them to vote against these two amendments. This is responding to a question from Catherine Saunders there. So do write to your MP. They will have these amendments in front of them next week, probably on Monday, and just write to them and tell them that this is totally not to do with domestic abuse bill. It shouldn't be part of the bill, and you should vote it down. It's allowing abuse victims to be pressured into taking abortion. There's no actual counselling going on, no actual meeting. It's all done over a phone. For all we know, it could be anonymous, or certainly people can lie about how old how their gestational age. We've had cases already exposed of 28-week abortion carried out using these tablets, which is illegal. So do write to your MP and tell them about that, and encourage your friends or your churches to do this as well, because if this goes through, these amendments, this will be the biggest change and the biggest liberalization of abortion, and we will have some of the most liberal laws on abortion, the worst laws on abortion in the world here in the UK.
I mean, Tim, who knows if one of the reasons why God allowed COVID is because the blood of the unborn child is speaking from the ground.
Yeah.
Because the blood speaks. Just like Cain and Abel, it speaks.
Yeah.
And we still, in the midst of death moving through town, we are still legalizing to kill more. When are we going to learn? And what I want to say is, to any member or anyone listening to us today, and you are part of a church that you know your church has resources, I'm begging you to go to your church leadership and elders and really compel them to think about calling us or finding ways we can help them set up an emergency pregnancy crisis helpline to help many people who fall into that category and be able to advise them. Churches can do this. If we have more of this, we will save more lives. I'm talking about because I like proactive leadership. We can do something about it. But if each one of you can begin to pressure your churches who have the resources to say, we're going to train somebody, we're going to invest money in it, and we're going to have this line, and anyone of faith or no faith can access it. We need to do that.
We do.
Yeah, and there are fantastic stories, aren't there, of how lives have been saved in this way, and babies have been born and grown up and so on. It's a great work. It's a really encouraging work when you do get involved in it. It's really good. Well, listen, I think we've run out of time today. Thank you so much, Ade and Andrea, for joining us, and thank you for watching on YouTube or Facebook. It really helps us if you like our posts and like our videos, and follow us on Facebook, or follow our YouTube channel as well. That's a really a great boost to our thing. It means more people will see our videos, more people will connect with us. Do follow us on other social media forums as well. We have on Monday night got a live stream seminar about marriage. We've just been talking a bit about no fault divorce. We've got very pleased to have Tony Rachinsky of the Coalition for Marriage coming, and he's going to talk to us at about 8 o'clock for about 20 minutes on should the government support marriage. And then we'll be opening up for live Q&A. Much like this format, you can ask your questions via Facebook and YouTube. So we'll look forward to seeing you there. That's Monday night, 8 p.m. And we're back here again at the same time on Friday as well. So do write to your MP about those abortion amendments. Do get them to vote them down. That's really important. And have a great weekend. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you.